Why, hello, folks. Thank you for joining our Missouri Department of Conservation Wild Webcast on the secrets of snakes, research revealed about copperheads. And our guest today is Dr. Benjamin Jellen, and he is with the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis. And he has been leading this research study at our Powder Valley Nature Center. So thanks for being with us today, Ben.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, and folks, let us know if you could hear us well enough. And as we're jumping right in, so we're talking about copperheads, and one of the cool things about them is their camouflage. What are we seeing here or not seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we talked about the secret lives of snakes, not only are they highly secretive and highly camouflaged, as you see, but there is a snake in this photo, but all you can see is its head. And we'll go into that exactly right there.
Right.
And then if you still can't see it, we can zoom in just by hitting advance again.
All right, we're getting closer in there.
Yeah, enhance.
It is amazing how well they're camouflaged.
Yeah, so, if you still don't see it, if you advance one more time, there'll be a little arrow that pops up to really guide you.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to be seeing more of these pictures. Why don't we just move on and see? You've had a lot of folks involved in this study, Ben, over time. So if you want to briefly tell us that and thank them.
Yeah, we're heading into just concluding our 5th year for this study of a radio telemetry project there at Powder Valley Conservation and Nature Center. We've had lots of help in the field, from students of mine to colleagues and friends to the St. Louis Zoo. It's been an amazing partner. And of course, none of this would have happened without NBC.
All right. So yes, a whole lot of thank yous. As you said, St. Louis Zoo, University of Health Sciences Pharmacy, and MDC, and a bunch of other folks. So we appreciate that also. And a big thanks goes out really to you, Ben, because without you, it wouldn't be possible. So why don't you briefly tell us a bit more about you?
Yeah, people always like to know where you're from and things like that. So I did my education. I'm from the St. Louis area originally, but my education was at University of Illinois and then back to SLU. I'm currently employed at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis. We like to get out and explore any and every chance we get. And over the past 23 years, I guess, I've really had 5 main study subjects. And they all kind of have a similar theme, or at least they used to, of being a species of special concern or threatened or endangered. So I've studied a little salamander species, an endangered turtle, of course, the endangered Massasauga rattlesnake. And then it's kind of shifted, and I did water snakes for a little while.
And those are the pictures up in the left-hand corner.
Correct. Yes. And I've done water snakes for a while. With them, I use them as models for snake sex attractant pheromones. But I like all of my projects to have a field and a lab component. And I love bacon. That's that picture down there.
Well, there you go. That makes it all good, right?
And the 5th one, and what this project is, and what this presentation is about. If you advance it one more, what I'm out in the field looking for now, the last 5 years, of course, the eastern copperhead. And I think when most people think about snakes, this is typically what they think of.
Right. Yikes.
Ferocious, attacking. This is not a copperhead any stretch of the imagination. It's a harmless northern water snake, although they do kind of look like copperheads. And I think the Missouri conservationist had a thing about mimics recently, and it was comparing the similarities and differences between northern water snakes and copperheads.
Yes.
But I think this is a common perception people have, and one of the things we're working for is to kind of dispel that. And I think when people think about my job, this is what they think of. I go out and I wrestle snakes and I'm risking life and limb, but really it's nothing as dramatic or flamboyant as that.
Right. So, the snakes aren't that big and any of that. So this is Copperheads. Why don't you jump in and tell us a bit about the project?
Yeah, so it's, like I said, we're heading into our 5th year here, and we've put radio transmitters, and we'll get into that in just a moment, into a number of different snakes. And so far, we've amassed somewhere around 2,500 radiolocations of what the snake is doing on any particular day, and that's spanned over a number of snakes, adults, baby snakes, etc. Let's see, what was it? And the number of radiolocations per day. And we usually collect about 40 to 50 data points per sheet. So we're amassing quite the data set here.
All right, so if we look at this, it's from August 2018. It's ongoing, concluding this year. You have what, almost 39 snakes that you've tagged.
Correct.
All right, and so
actually, yeah, 39 that we found over that whole 5 years. So people think they're, falling out of trees are really, really common at Powder Valley. We're out there every day, 7 days a week for 7 or 8 months out of the year, and we've seen a total of 39 individuals.
So they really are secretive and lead secret lives. And again, you're using your directives. You want to see their ecology and also kind of helping people understand better about venomous snakes. Yeah,
to try to dispel that myth that they're, out to get you and ferocious animals.
Well, right. And the copperhead in particular, it covers a pretty broad range in most of the eastern and southern United States. But you also noted earlier when we were talking that there's kind of a unique one or subspecies here in Missouri. Tell us a bit more about this information.
Yeah, so I don't know where every individual falls on whether they believe subspecies is a legitimate category or not, but genetically there's some interesting things happen. If you can advance once, you'll feel a red dot pop up right where St. Louis is. And that is kind of the integration of about 3 different, at least they look different. I don't know if genetically they're all that different, but it's kind of a unique spot where at least 3 different populations could have come together to form the one that's at Powder Valley. And Powder Valley is really great habitat. It's this oak hickory forest with a little bit of open areas surrounding it, which is perfect for what the snake needs in the Midwest here.
Right, because looking again at this information, they kind of like timbered hillsides. They want some caves and gravel banks and burrows and kind of woodlands. So again, as you were mentioning, Powder Valley, which here's a map of it, is kind of an ideal habitat.
Yeah, and one thing interesting about this site is if you look at what's surrounding it, to the north and east, it's suburbia Kirkwood. So that's not the best habitat for copperheads. And then to the south and east and west, you've got Interstate 44 and Interstate 270. So Powder Valley is really this little haven, this little pocket or oasis of habitat that's left for the snake here in the St. Louis metro area.
Right, and as you mentioned, looking at all the highway systems along the south of it and, even east of it, they are kind of limited and it serves as a bit of a barrier to them.
Certainly, it's difficult to cross 1 lane or 2 lanes of traffic, let alone 8 lanes. It's fogger, like level 99.
Well, right. So again, a bit more about their, they're both predators and prey. They're kind of in the mid zone. Why don't you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, one thing that was quite surprising is with all the other projects I've done, I've never had as much mortality for the study subjects as I've had here. You would think that copperheads are kind of top of the food chain, but that's really not it at all. They're certainly prey for many other animals, including raptors. So birds of prey like owls and hawks and raptors and such. And also for foxes and coyotes, skunks, and even moles have been known to eat baby ones. Turkeys have been known to eat baby ones. So they're really kind of in the middle of the food web.
Right, and you were saying moles. So moles burrow. So how do they eat them, catch them?
Yeah, well, the reports that I've read were that the mole would tunnel up underneath where a baby copperhead was, and then bite it, pinch it, and pull it back down in the burrow and eat it.
That is crazy fascinating. So a bunch of things eat them. What do they eat?
Well, you can notice on that picture there, the copperheads are pit vipers. So they have a heat-sensing pit, and I tried to put that picture on there to really illustrate this.
So the pit. Let's focus on that photo. So the pit is the little dot in front of the eye.
Correct.
Okay, and it's not its nose, but that's a special pit organ which helps it sense what, heat?
Yeah, it helps it sense different temperatures, kind of like heat sensitive, goggles or something that somebody could wear. So with that, with what stands out would be something that's a different temperature than the environment. So warm-blooded prey like mammals and birds would certainly fall into that category. And if you look at their diet, they preferentially eat rodents and ground nesting birds, but really things like other reptiles and amphibians is kind of invisible to them because of the temperature profile.
Okay, and when as venomous snakes, one thing we always want to point out to folks, a lot of times folks will say it's a poisonous snake, and that's not correct. It's venomous. And the easy thing to remember is if it's poisonous, if you eat it, you will get sick and or die. If it's venomous, if it bites you, you will get sick and or die. So poisonous is if you ingest it, venomous, or if you bite it, venomous is if it bites you. So just to get that kind of out for folks. And you're talking about the saliva and the hemotoxic and neurotoxic. So one basically affects the blood and the other affects our nervous system. Would you briefly touch on that?
Oh, sure. So venom's not really designed for defense, believe it or not. It's designed to capture prey and then start digesting prey. So snakes have fangs, and like you said, they will inject venom into their prey item. And it has a couple different things. The hemotoxic, as you said, hemo relates to blood. It ruptures red blood cells, so you're no longer transporting oxygen around the body, which sounds like a pretty bad thing, and it is. And then there's the neurotoxin component, where it disrupts the signals from the brain and spinal cord to anything else in the body, to the muscles that control your lungs, to your heart, to your skeletal muscles. You could run away. So it really attacks and immobilizes the prey. And then in the meantime, the venom that's inside starts digesting the proteins, the fats, anything that's inside that organism to start the digestion process.
So kind of like a spider, when it injects a small insect, it starts dissolving it from the inside. So that's what the hemotoxin in the venom does. And this works pretty quickly. So say, a copperhead catches a mouse. How fast are we talking here for the venom to work?
Yeah, well, catch is kind of a relative term because they're what we call strike and release predators, where instead of them biting and hanging on to the prey until it dies, where the prey could scratch or bite the snake, they strike it and inject the venom and then release it. And then they use their chemosensory, their smelling of the prey's trail.
Mm-hmm. Are you still there, Ben?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I forgot part of your question.
Oh, well, it happens real fast. So it strikes a mouse. The mouse jumps in the air, and by the time it hits the ground, it's already dead?
Yeah, I've seen that happen, and I've seen it take 30 seconds or a minute. It kind of depends upon the size of the prey, how much venom is injected, and things along that nature. But it can work extraordinarily quickly.
Okay, before we move on kind of to the next, we already have a question. And generally, somebody wants to know if you're bitten by a copperhead, what are the symptoms and do you need to go to the hospital?
Yeah, definitely go to the hospital. If you're bitten by any venomous snake, what you could experience, you'd experience probably right away. It's not really painful, but you'll start to feel a bunch of heat in the exact area where you're bit. You can definitely expect to experience swelling, considerable swelling in that area, and potentially shortness of breath, nausea, things along that nature. So the best thing to do is try to limit how much venom is getting out into your system at a time. So you wrap, you stop circulation, you wrap wherever the bite was, some kind of closer to your heart, ramp them up, and then immobilize, of course, wherever you were bitten, if it's on your arm or what have you. Don't flex your muscles, don't swing your arm, keep it as still as possible and above your heart as possible, and certainly go seek medical attention right away.
Right, so the key thing is you should notice if you get bit by a snake and immediately seek medical attention.
Yes.
All right. So I mean, finding them, they're pretty difficult. So these pictures show them, but why don't you tell us how you initially find them and then how you find them again?
Well, we seem to just kind of stumble into them when we're really, really, really lucky. As you can see with their camouflage, they really blend into the leaves. And believe it or not, these two pictures is like best case scenario. Usually they're nothing like this where they're fully out and visible. They're usually buried underneath the leaves. But if they were like this, it'd be relatively easy to find them.
Right.
However, most of the time, they look more like what we're going to see in a moment here.
Okay, and Ben, before we move on to that slide, here, these photographs, who took these amazing photographs of close-ups?
I took all of them, unless there's, video or
Right.
picture correct.
So when you take these, how far away from these snakes are you? I hope you have a pretty good telephoto lens.
Yeah, I was going to say I can zoom in pretty good. So I'm always at least a few feet away, certainly out of striking distance.
Right, and this is where we emphasize to people, if you encounter a snake, and if you want to take pictures, do not get closer than really a few feet, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so these are the good pictures. Now moving on to the next slide, which is so difficult to see where the snakes are in these pictures. This is what you typically encounter, right?
Right, and when we're doing a long-term study or you want to measure any parameters on any individual, you need to find them one time and then find them again to see how much they've grown or where they've moved to, or if their hormone profiles have changed or anything along that nature. So if they were always out in the open, it'd be pretty easy. But most of the time, they're very well camouflaged. In each of these pictures, there's a snake. Perhaps people at home can probably point it out and see them. But most of the time, they're really, really, really camouflaged. So we have to employ some method to kind of level the playing field and be able to find them over and over and over and over again.
Okay, and Ben, we have another question. Speaking of how incredibly well they're camouflaged, do copperheads have different coloration depending on their age?
In a small way, yes. In that when copperheads and other venomous snakes in Missouri are born, they have kind of a bright yellow tipped tail, and they think that that's used in what they call caudal or tail luring, where they'll wave it and kind of like the tongue of an alligator snapping turtle, how it looks like a worm and then a fish will come.
Right, a big, juicy, tasty bug for, their prey to be attracted to, and then they strike. Okay.
Right,
So,
and then as they age, that just becomes all black. But
all
besides
right.
that, the young look exactly like adults.
Okay, so as far as finding them and refining them, here's some tools that you need. Of course, you need researchers. And who's the researcher in this first photo?
I'm glad you asked. That's my wonderful colleague and friend, Brittany Nyer, who's been with this project since its inception, and is all and usually the morale boost we need to keep going.
Right.
So we need a dedicated researcher or two. And then in order to find them again, like I said, we got to level the playing field somehow. So we will implant the adults with a radio transmitter that sends out a signal at a specific radio frequency. So each of those little transmitters there, they come in different shapes, sizes. Most of the difference in size is due to how much battery is in there, and then battery relates to how long the transmitter will last. And you need something to pick up the signal, so we have a receiver. And then since they move kind of far, and you want to know what direction they move, you use an antenna to pick up the signal from further away and kind of pinpoint which direction it's coming from.
All right, so all of these things come into place. And you mentioned about implanting some of these transmitters. Here are some photographs of that. So how's this procedure done? Where's it done?
Yeah, so I always kind of liken this to being abducted by aliens, where we'll find a snake out in the wild at Powder Valley, and we'll collect it, measure it, weigh it, and then we'll take it to the zoo at the Animal Hospital, the St. Louis Zoo, and they've been so wonderful to work with. They do everything pro bono, but they'll put the snake through a surgery in completely, sterile conditions. So they'll anesthetize the snake, and then which is the top left there. And then the top right picture, then they'll make an incision, usually about 2/3 the length down the body, and then you see the transmitter in the bottom left. Then they will insert the transmitter, like bottom right, into the what we call the peritoneal cavity. So kind of like the abdominal pelvic cavity of the snake. It's not inside the stomach or inside the intestines, but inside the body cavity, right next to the intestines and stomach. And then they'll suture everything up. They'll suture up the muscle, they'll suture up the skin, give it some antibiotics, and we release it exactly where we found it.
Okay, so where you find it, you get it, you do what you do, take it to the zoo, they do the surgical parts, give it back to you, you take it back to exactly where you found it and release it. And that's the internal. Now, here's some images of an external attachment. How does that work?
Well, we were lucky enough that one of the snakes we had a couple of years ago was getting ready to have babies. So I bought the tiniest transmitters that I could. They weighed, I think it was 0.6 grams. So a very, very tiny amount. And as you saw with the adults, they went through a surgical procedure. And I didn't feel right putting baby snakes through that same surgical procedure when they really need a lot of their energy and resources for growth. So I chatted with the veterinarians at the animal hospital, and we came up with an idea that we thought would work, where we would just put sutures underneath the skin and then tie that around the transmitter and then load the transmitter up with some veterinary super glue to keep it in place. And kind of the nice thing about this was that the sutures dissolve naturally after 60 days, and the battery in the transmitter only lasts 60 days. So there was nothing where we'd have to find the transmitter again, or it would continue to be a burden on the snake. It would just fall off. And it worked pretty well. So we are the first study to ever have radio telemetry on neonate copperheads, and probably one of the first 8 to 10 in the world to ever do it on neonate snakes in the entire history of everything that we know of.
That is really fascinating, unique research. I'm going to back up. You mentioned you didn't want to implant it because the female had young. Now, one thing, copperheads, they give birth to live young or to eggs?
Right. So in Missouri, we have, and just in the United States as a whole, the venomous snakes, so the pit vipers and like copperheads and cottonmouths, and then what we call the natricine snakes. So the water snakes, garter snakes, they give birth to live young, or what we actually call ovoviviparous, where it's live young still encased in a membrane, but not like a shell that you would typically think of. And then all the other snakes, racers, rat snakes, etc., they would lay eggs, leathery type of eggs.
Okay, well that's good to know. Somebody also wants to know, have you ever been bitten?
I have.
How'd that work out?
Well, you know, I always say it'll ruin your day if it happens. So, but I've got all 10 fingers and toes, and I've got an interesting story to tell. And I learned as much about the healthcare system and insurance that night as I did about the physiological effects of snake bite.
Okay, good to know. But so you have been bitten, you've survived, all is well.
Yes.
All right. So when you are doing your research and it's been, you know, you have the transmitters in there and all of that, tell us a bit about what's going on here, finding these things.
Right. So when we find them, we want to collect them and get as much information as possible, how big they are, how much they weigh, exactly where they are on the face of the earth. We will take GPS coordinates, and we will insert all of them or inject all of them with what we call a PIT tag, which stands for Passive Integrated Transponder. It's the same thing that your pet would get at the veterinary's office, you know, kind of between their shoulder blades.
Yeah, like it's about the size of maybe a grain of rice. And yeah, so for dogs and cats, okay.
So that's not the transmitter part, but that's just in case we ever find it again. That's our method of knowing who it is.
Okay, fascinating.
But from the individual as well, which we could use for genetic analysis, hormone analysis, and that's really about it, genetics and hormones.
Okay, that's what you're looking for. And now we're not going to get into everything here, but this is your data sheet. And it shows that you do collect a lot of information. A couple things that's kind of neat is the habitat. So you could also track where it was on a trail at Powder Valley, or if it was on a road or by something. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we'll go out and we're interested in where the snakes are on any given day, but also if that changes due to temperature or due to different seasons or anything of the sort. And when we were designing the study, Brittany and I met with Powder Valley and Jeff Brigler and asked what they wanted to get out of it. And they were really interested in about what the snakes were doing at Powder Valley in particular, how close they were to roads, how close they were to trails, if there's any hot spots where the snakes tend to cross trails more, where the snakes are hibernating. So we tried to build that in as best we could to the data set.
You know, Ben, that's kind of a good note. How did this get started at Powder Valley? I guess there was kind of an interest because people were seeing copperheads on the trails.
Yeah, so actually what had happened was Powder Valley didn't know about it directly, but I believe they learned about it through a Facebook post where there was somebody at Powder Valley who encountered a snake and was wearing flip-flops and tried to shoo it off the trail, and it bit them in the foot, and it turned out to be a copperhead. Obviously Powder Valley knew there were copperheads there initially, but that kind of response, hey, let's know more about this population and use that information then to inform the public and to see what we can learn about the specific snakes at Powder Valley and relate it to public coming to visit at Powder Valley.
Okay, good to know. And here's a good note for our viewers and folks joining us. Most snake bites happen on people's hands or arms as they're trying to reach for them, or on their feet or ankles as, like you said, somebody's trying to kick it or shoo it or something like that. So again, if you encounter any snake, give it several feet of adequate distance.
Exactly. Yeah, I always just say give it a wide berth, walk around it, and if you get bit on your foot, obviously, maybe you didn't see the snake, but if you get bit on your hands or fingers, unless you were reaching to pick up a log that you didn't know what was underneath, that just means you're way too close to begin with to the snake and shouldn't be handling it.
Right. Well, good to know. And speaking of some of these snakes, this slide shows some ranges of two key snakes in your study. The one you named Captain Kirk. So tell us a bit more about kind of what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I just kind of want to give people an appreciation for how much of the area and habitat they'll use at Powder Valley. So you can see they use a considerable amount. And it varies snake to snake, and it'll vary male to or adult to baby or neonate snake, and it'll vary during time of year, like mating season versus non-mating season, when males move a lot more, and it may even vary male to female as well.
Okay, so this slide of Captain Kirk, give us an idea of how big we're talking geography-wise. What distances?
Yeah, at the bottom, it's 18.3 hectares. And I'm sorry I forget the conversion to, acres or anything of the sort. But I don't know. You could type it into a conversion tool and see what 18.3 hectares comes out as.
Right. Well, for reference, that's the highway system to the south of Powder Valley.
Right. I tried to put it 44 and 270, and also the trails and where Powder Valley Nature Center actually was, to kind of give you an idea of all the habitat that it was encountered at throughout the year.
Right. So the simple takeaway we get from this, an adult copperhead, a snake crawling on the ground, has covered this much distance during part of the season. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and that's the entire season, and that's everywhere that snake was throughout the year.
Okay, so that's throughout the year. So as we could see that comparison, and that gives us a little bit more comparison of different times of year.
Well, here, this one is about two baby snakes. And the first thing to notice is that we're very much zoomed in. So you can't relate the scale from the last one to this one. The last one, you can see the scale bars here. It was like 200 meters, I believe, on those two bolts. And this is 170 and 224 feet. But the reason I put this on is because these were the transmitters that were on two different baby snakes. And it was a litter of 6 babies that was born. And we put transmitters on all 6 of them. And 5 of the ones did what we see in the left, where they stayed very close to where they were born. and then went into hibernation or didn't make it to hibernation. But one of those 6 was an explorer, man. He just ran off and bolted. And that distance that you see it actually turned out to be, I think it was 106 meters, which is about 300 feet, the length of a football field or soccer field or so. And he did that in one day. And this is something the size of a pencil.
Something the size of a pencil went like further than a football field in one day.
Correct.
Wow.
For sure, I was just going to find a transmitter that something, aided and carried it off and just dropped the transmitter after they ate the snake. But he was there. He was in a dry creek bed underneath a rock, and it really blew my mind.
Interesting. So the takeaway from this is most young copperheads stay in the general area where they were birthed, but something like 20% can move to a new area and find a new territory, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we see across animals in general in terms of the majority stay close to where they are, and then a handful of them disperse.
Okay, a couple things. The Captain Kirk, that big geographic area we saw before, that's about 45 acres. So he covers about 45 acres. And then we have another question, Ben, especially with this juvenile moving to new territory. Are copperheads territorial? So if they encounter another snake or copperhead, do they kind of defend that territory?
No, and they're not territorial, and they really don't interact with other copperheads except during the mating season. And that's pretty much the only time that you'd find 2 snakes together outside of hibernation, where there's a limited number of spots for them to hibernate, so they will hibernate with other copperheads and even other species of snakes.
Okay, so aside from that, do copperheads, do they eat other snakes?
Typically not. Like I said, they have those heat pits, so they really focus on warm-blooded prey. But I'm sure opportunistically, if something happened to be passing by,
right,
they wouldn't.
But other snakes, such as king snakes, eat copperheads.
Yeah, and in fact, that's how king snakes got their name. They specialize on eating other snakes.
So they're the kings. Okay.
They call it the king of the other snakes because it was eating other snakes.
And as we're looking at that, we have a question about what kind of habitat do they give birth in, and do they birth them all at once? And let's talk some habitat here.
Yeah, so there's a slide at the end where we'll kind of talk about the requirements that the pregnant or gravid females have while they're developing their young. But they tend to have like an open canopy, so they get lots of sun. They warm up their bodies quicker to enhance the gestation process. So then they're born pretty much in an open canopy area, usually close to where they're going to hibernate. So there's something that they could get into, some rock crevices, rodent burrows, something along those lines. And I do have these series of slides that talks all about different kinds of habitat for the adults and the neonates. And I just wanted to kind of briefly go through all these, not in detail, but just to say that we're collecting a lot of data, but not ready to discuss it yet. But if anybody is curious and they'd like to email me or something afterwards, we can certainly chat about habitat or the next slide if you advance it there.
Oh, a whole lot of data here. So we're going to kind of glean over this. What do you want us to take away?
Temperatures, habitat. Next one we got after that.
A whole lot of data.
A whole lot of data. Keep going. And then neonates, and like I said, I don't really want to do that for this presentation. One of the reasons is that it's preliminary data. Not all of it's entered. And this slide here is kind of the reason why I'm shying away from that. Here's the problem with preliminary data on the left versus, the entire data set ready to go. So this is the same snake. And if you just look at a subset of the year, so in this case on the left, August to October, this is what the home range size for that snake you think would be. If you incorporate the entire year, April through October, you wind up with, oh, wow, it really did something different. So until all the data is in, like I said, we're still collecting data. Until it's in and the numbers are crunched, I kind of want to shy away from specific numbers, but I'm happy to talk in general.
Okay, so as we look at this slide, kind of the simple explanation, So on the right, that larger area is from April to October. So that includes the mating season, which is why this snake, I think this was Captain Kirk, was really out looking for a mate in a much larger area. And after that, from August to October, is more of this snake's general range.
Yeah, just from after the mating period to where he went to hibernate, which if you can see that kind of point right underneath Interstate 270 is where he hibernated 2 years in a row, actually.
Okay, so I think we have another slide about that. From this point, why don't you talk about, the annual life of a snake?
Yeah, instead of crunching all the numbers, like I said, I thought we'd just do generalities. And my daughter loves frog and toad, and we were reading frog and toad the other night, and I was like, frog and toad all year. We could make this snake and other snake all year.
All right.
So in the spring, they'll come out of hibernation, usually in the first week of April or so. They, as you can see, these are two different hibernacula. One is just some type of burrow underneath a really large rock, and the other is kind of this crevice hole in this bluff hillside. And we've had about 10 snakes come out of this exact spot on the right over the last 2 years.
Oh, wow. And when they wake up in the spring, they don't just kind of hit the road. They stick around for a bit. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, they'll come up, and usually they keep nice hours. So if you're interested in studying animals, they keep banker's hours. They come out about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning after it warms up. Then they'll go back down in their burrow at night around 5 o'clock or so. But they come up for the warmer part of the day, and they get some sun and kickstart their body again. And then to try to prevent them getting too cold at night, because the temperatures can still be pretty cold, then they'll go back below ground. So basically, I say they wake up, they hit snooze for 2 to 3 weeks, and then they start slowly dispersing out, which is egress.
Okay, so during those first initial 2 weeks, when it warms up but it's still cold at night, they come up, like you said, mid-morning to midday. Are they eating or hunting during this time?
They're not actively foraging as far as I can tell, but again, opportunistically.
Right, if a mouse comes along, they'll take advantage of it.
Right, these are things that haven't eaten in about 6 months, because they can't eat anything for the last couple of weeks before hibernation starts, because they need to make sure that whatever they've eaten gets fully digested and out of the body. Otherwise, their temperature is so low, whatever they ate would actually rot in their gut.
Oh, wow. So they need a couple of weeks after their last meal to digest and expel whatever they've eaten, because they get so chill, literally, that if there's a mouse in their belly, it'll rot and end up killing them.
Correct.
Huh, fascinating. Okay, so once they wake up, they've had their kind of spring snooze and they're hitting the road. So this is what happens next, their egress.
Then they'll start slowly moving away from their hibernacula. We can chat about that. I haven't really found a good cue for this, and some snakes will do it at different times. It doesn't seem to be a direct temperature or anything related except for the snake's own individual personality, I suppose.
Okay, so when they egress, a couple more questions. Have you found, or do you know, will they burrow into like brush piles and things like that?
Well, they won't burrow themselves. They can't dig any holes, but
Okay.
certainly they're almost always associated with some type of cover: a log, a rock, a brush pile, blockers, brambles, rodent burrows.
And something that kind of regulates temperature, hot and cold.
Yeah, that can cast shade, because they're what we call poikilothermic, or what people used to call ectothermic, but they generate a little bit of heat. But they really rely on their immediate surroundings. So if it's hot, move into the shade or go below ground. If they're cold, go find a sunny spot next to them to warm up. So they try to give themselves a couple options.
Okay, and then Mary wants to know, she noticed an odor from copperheads. Do they, I know some snakes emit this really pungent, stinky odor as a defense, or do copperheads do anything like that?
Yeah, they have musk, and I've heard a lot of people say that it smells like cucumbers. Maybe I haven't smelled enough cucumbers or smelled enough copperheads, but I don't think those two are alike. But it does smell like, to me, there's some type of conifer evergreen that has a scent exactly like copperhead. And I'm terrible with plants and trees.
Right.
But I downloaded iNaturalist, and I know where one of these trees is. So next time I walk by, I'm going to use my little app to figure out what species it is.
There you go. So what we know, copperheads do emit an odor. We do not recommend anyone getting close enough to see what that odor is. But yeah, it's a strong odor. And another question, do they like water? I mean, are they around water? Do they go in water? Things like that.
Of course, it can happen, but very, very, very seldomly. However, a species that looks almost identical to them, except how thick and thin the crossbands are across their back, is the northern water snake, which is a species intimately associated with water.
Okay, right. So people may confuse that. All right, well, good. And thanks, everyone, for sharing your questions. Keep sharing your questions as we've done in the past through the chat box. But getting back to kind of the year in the life, so Ben, summer comes along, and we know it gets really hot in Missouri in the summer. So they're trying to beat the heat and eat. Tell us more.
Yeah, so that picture we had at the beginning of the slide, beginning of the presentation, was just the copperhead's head. This is that same copperhead, but from a different point of view.
Wow. You can.
I think that's the last thing many a rodent ever sees.
Right, because that camouflage is so amazing. That head looks just like a leaf. So, wow. Okay, so during the summer, they're beating the heat and they're eating.
Yeah, so like I said, they'll have strike release, and then on the right is a copperhead. You can see his tongue sticking out. It's forked. It's forked the same reason why we have two nostrils, two eyes, two ears. That way you can sense whatever direction your cue is coming from. So they use that to then track the prey that then they envenomated and then go consume.
That is fascinating. So when they're busy, eating and building up really fuel, because now in fall, does mating take place in fall?
Yeah, you'll read reports where it takes place in the spring and also the fall, and that very well may be the case, but I think the spring mating season in April and May is very negligible, almost compared to the late August, September, early October mating season.
Okay, so they can have two mating seasons throughout the year, early spring and then early fall, but most it's early spring.
No, most is in the fall.
Or most in the fall. Okay. And I know folks are wondering, the photo on the right, that is not a copperhead, correct?
No, you're correct. It's two Massasauga rattlesnakes. I actually did a Google image search to see if I could find what they call female defense polygyny, where a male snake crawls around and actively defends the female by fighting other males that come into contact during the mating season. But there was only like 4 total pictures, and certainly none on copperhead. So I just used one that I had taken about with Massasauga rattlesnakes.
Okay, so that's a Massasauga rattlesnake, actually 2 of them. And you were talking when they're mating. So as we saw earlier, Captain Kirk has a huge territory comparatively when he's on the hunt to mate. And then when they're actually mating, how's that work for snakes?
Well, I don't know how much detail you want to get into, but and actually I've done a lot of research in this area in terms of what we call estrus and pheromone production. But male snakes search for females using the females' pheromones.
Okay, and is that where the forked tongue comes into play?
Exactly. That's a huge component, allowing them to pinpoint where the female snake is.
So she's putting out pheromones. He's using his tongue to find her. They meet, and then they kind of wrap around each other. And you mentioned that if another male happens upon them, the existing male will fight that male?
Yeah, and that's not true for all snakes, but it is true for copperheads and for Massasauga rattlesnakes. But mating, when they actually mate, they're straightened out. But then when they're not mating, the male literally wraps his body around and guards the female from any other males that may also be finding her based off of her pheromone. And then if another male comes in, then the two will kind of like a glorious arm wrestling type thing for the two males.
Okay, right, right. All right. So in the fall, mating and then ingress. That is when they are heading into hibernation, right?
Correct.
So tell us more about how that happens. And again, well, let's back up here a little bit. So is this Captain Kirk again?
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out most of those extreme data points, the ones on the outside, were all during the mating season and all last over about a 1 week period until he found a female and then stopped moving for the next, 10, 14 days or so.
Okay, so this was during the mating season. A couple questions here, Ben. How long do copperheads generally live in the wild?
Not long, as far as I can tell. We've had the lifespan of one of our snakes, or the lifespan of our snakes on average has been 1 year when we had a radio in it. So, and it'll get eaten by something, it'll get run over, something will happen. However, in the wild, if nothing happens, I would think that 5 or 6 years is about the maximum that they would survive, just rolling the dice every day. And
Right, it's tough life.
yeah.
All right. And we were talking earlier about males and females and all that. Are there size differences between males and females?
Yeah, so with animals in general, and humans kind of fall into this category if you want to include us. But if the male grows larger than the female, then it's due because there's fighting in the mating season. So because two male copperheads fight one another, actually I should probably detract that statement. Maybe historically, evolutionary, that was part of our thing, but obviously not anymore.
Right. But in animals where the males fight each other for mates and territory, the males tend to be larger than the females. And if animals don't have to fight for mates and territory, then the males aren't necessarily larger and the female may be larger.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So this is Captain Kirk, and we talked about covering his territory. And then in the fall, they mate and they get ready to go into hibernation where they spend the winter. Burr.
Yeah. So the snakes have to do something. They can't survive these types of temperatures, and obviously they don't have wings, so they can't fly away. So they have to go underground. And you can hit. There we go. And so they'll find a suitable place underground for them to hibernate. And one of the things that was immediately interesting about this project was where the snakes were hibernating. On the left, we see Interstate 270, and Brittany's there. And Captain Kirk hibernated underneath Interstate 270 in the exact same burrow 2 years in a row. And then on the right, we see Craigwald Road, which leads to the Powder Valley driveway. And one of our snakes, one of our other snakes, hibernated in the exact same spot in the riprap building up Craigwald Road 2 years in a row.
Okay, so wintering, they go underground, and actually the rocks and everything to build these highways serves a great purpose for them because they can slither in there and get down and deep enough for wintering. Now, what do they need to survive the winter as far as temperatures and things?
If you want to advance, the transmitters that we have implanted in the snakes are temperature sensitive, so we can calculate how warm the transmitter is by how fast or slow it's beeping. And since the transmitter is inside the snake, that gives us a pretty good idea of what the snake's body temperature is. So I put these in centigrade. So I also put a conversion up there. I was asked to by somebody very close to me to make it more relatable. So anyway, you can see the temperatures. In February, they get the coldest, probably somewhere around 45-ish degrees Fahrenheit. And then in March, they start warming up, and then they come out of hibernation. You can look at the minimum temperatures that they get. One of them got down to 4.6 degrees, and that snake did not come out of hibernation.
Okay, so in Fahrenheit, kind of the minimum temperature for them to survive, you said, is about 45 degrees?
That's what it seems to be so far. Again, all the data's not in, but somewhere around there.
Okay, and that's the reason they need to burrow far enough underground. You know, kind of when we're digging or planting, there's a frost freeze level. So they need to get below that so they don't literally freeze. Okay.
Correct.
And then we have a lot more data here. Should we keep going?
I just kind of wanted to point out that these things that we're talking about, emergence, egress, ingress, the snake's entire life cycle and physiology is based off temperatures. So I was trying to relate, what is the cue for timing? You're down in a hole with no light, no calendar, no alarm clock for 6 months. How do you know when they come back up out of that hole?
Right.
Temperature gradient. So I started looking at what cues when we started seeing snakes, what was the average temperature, and then when they started moving away from the hibernacular for egress, what was the temperature? And really, emergence seems to be really tightly related to temperature, but so does ingress when they move back to their hibernacular. As soon as there's one cold night in the fall, they make a beeline for wherever their hibernacular is.
Okay, so even though, and well, a lot of reason is they're cold-blooded as reptiles. So yeah, their whole life revolves around their environmental temperatures. So as you said, in the spring when it warms up, they take temperature cues, and in the fall, as we can appreciate, you get that first really chilly fall night, and that's their cue to say, let's hit it, let's go to bed. Okay,
Exactly.
so their life is about temperature. So some points to consider, share with us.
Yeah, I'm always asked how many copperheads are at Powder Valley, and I literally have no answer to that. Usually what I say, I'm confident there's between 1 and 1 million, somewhere in that range.
Right, because I think you've been able to capture and track 40 of them, but there's a whole lot more. Okay. And what are the odds that somebody may encounter a copperhead?
Very, very, very low. As I said, we're doing this for 5 years, and essentially we found 30 adults out in the wild, because of that 39 total, 9 of those were born to adult females. So really, 30 adults over 5 years. We're out there 7 days a week, walking through the habitat, just not on trails, and we find an average of 6 per year.
Okay, and again, to reiterate, their lives revolve around temperatures, and I know a lot of the trails at Powder Valley are blacktop. So people may encounter them if the temperatures are right. They may be sunning on the blacktop. And if people encounter them, give them room, plenty of room. They want to avoid you a lot more than you want to encounter them.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's very unlikely you'll see one there. But if they do, here's your contact information if folks want to let you know, report that they've encountered a snake. And then the last one here, if people, most Missouri is copperhead country, so they're worried about them in their yards, or, if they encounter them, what are some good points people can do to maybe avoid having copperheads and snakes around their houses and in their yards?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in copperhead country, some of it's going to be unavoidable, but there are things you can do to make your property less attractive. So keep your lawn mowed. They like cover, so if this grass is really short, they're really exposed to predators, and they won't want to cross it or come on it. Keep it free of debris and cover that would attract rodents who would make nests in it, and then the copperheads would go in to eat those rodents.
Right, and rock piles and wood piles, that's also possible habitat for them. So pay attention if you're around those areas.
Yeah.
All right, and as far as, we're looking here now at morbidity and mortality. So how many snakes die and how long they live and things like that. So real quickly here, they don't live a long time.
Right. On average, we keep a snake on the air for about 1 year. And even just last Monday, we were out tracking, and one of the snakes that we had a transmitter in was eaten. So they're extremely mid-food web, and it's been very difficult to keep a decent number of snakes on the air to collect data. They're really food for a lot of different things, but besides that, there are those interstates and roads. Snakes do get run over. We had one drown in a flash flood after a heavy rain, which is the picture on the top left. The one on the bottom left is actually Captain Kirk, and that's how we found him a couple of summers ago after, I think, a raptor probably got to him. So, but it's very difficult to keep these snakes on the air.
Right. So again, like you said, in the wild, on average, they live about a year. you know. So with some interesting facts. Now here we see a copperhead and a turtle kind of crossing paths. Now they're not a threat to each other because a copperhead's not really going to be able to eat a turtle, and a turtle has no interest in eating a copperhead. But what else do you want us to know from this slide?
Well, people always ask, what are the next steps and what are we finding that's interesting? So I think this idea that the snakes keep coming back to the same snake will come back to the exact same spot over and over and over again. So they call that site fidelity. But also multiple snakes will find the exact same spot. To me, it's kind of like you're on the interstate in the middle of nowhere and there's one off ramp for gas. Whatever it is about that spot, snakes tend to pick that when they're on their way between point A and point B. Of course, whatever's happening with their temperatures, particularly when they're hibernating, and when it's really hot, like we had here a couple of weeks ago, what temperature are they maintaining themselves at? Because with reptiles, of course, they can get too cold. They can also get too hot.
Right.
And their muscles lock up, and they could just not be able to move and then bake, literally. And then, of course, what we're finding with the baby snakes, with the neonates, that's brand new information. Where the snakes are crossing trails at Potter Valley and where there's any hot spots. And then, of course, the ultimate goal is to apply all this data that we're collecting. And it's interesting in its own right, so there'll probably be a couple of presentations and peer-reviewed publications and such. But to use it in conservation and management decisions and just to inform the general public about what copperheads are doing in eastern Missouri. And then also with public education. The more you know, I think the more accepting and understanding people would be.
Right, right. And again, this is still mid-research. You're wrapping up this year. Then you have to crunch all the numbers, write the papers, get the findings. And at the end, as you mentioned, it will help folks not only at Powder Valley, but in general, have a better understanding of copperheads and everything about them. So
that's the hope.
What an amazing amount of information. And it looks like we're wrapping up. So what are we seeing here in the picture? That's part of a copperhead.
Yeah, there's the tail, and you can see how it's all black at the end. That part when it was born would have been the part that was yellow.
Okay.
Coloration. But that's actually a female. That's the female snake who drowned. So on the other picture, when she drowned, she had 3 babies that she was still gestating and didn't get a chance to give birth to them. But the babies are in the posterior section of the snake, and a lot of times when the females grab it, she'll want to stay as secretive and hidden as possible, but she needs to keep her body temperature warm. So a lot of times she'll stick out the posterior part of her body, let the sun hit that and help accelerate the development of the embryos inside.
Okay, so as we're seeing this along kind of the tail, as you move up, it really thickens out suddenly, and that's where her live young are inside of her. So she's putting that out in the sun so they could warm up and continue their gestation while the rest of her is staying hidden. Yeah. Fascinating. Well, I think that's about a wrap then, Ben. We're out of time. We want to thank everyone for joining us to learn more about the secrets of snakes and the research Ben and his colleagues are doing at Copper Valley. And Ben, we want to thank you for joining us and sharing this fascinating information.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe. I really appreciate the opportunity to get some information out there.
Well, and that about wraps it up, folks. So thank you for joining this Wild Webcast. If you want to watch some previous Wild Webcasts that we've done, simply visit us online at mdc.mo.gov and use the search bar, the search tool, to search for Wild Webcasts. And again, thanks a lot, Ben, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
I've got somebody here who is being extremely patient, and she'd like to say hi to everybody out there listening. Here's my daughter, Eve.
Oh, hi, cutie. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for saying hi. All right, you all have a great day now.
Thanks. You too, Joe. Thanks
all right.
for everybody out there.
Bye.